Welcome back, fellow Jungians, to the Jungian Hour. Tonight I want to speak to someone specific. Not everyone. Someone. The woman who woke up this morning before anyone else in the house, who stood in the kitchen in the quiet before the day began, probably with a cup of something warm, and had exactly 2 minutes to herself before the first person needed something, before the first question was asked, before the first problem of the day landed on her, because that is where problems in this house land. On her. Always. On her. The woman who knows everyone's schedule but cannot remember the last time someone asked about hers. The woman who has been strong for so long that people have simply stopped considering the possibility that she might not be. Who has held things together through things that would have broken most people. Who has sat in parking lots and cried where nobody could see, and then dried her eyes and walked back in and kept going. The woman who lies awake at night, not because she is anxious about herself, but because she is going through the list. Did he eat enough today? Does she need a ride tomorrow? Did I call her back? Did I remember to pay that? Is he doing okay at school? Is she telling me everything? What needs to happen this week that I have not yet written down? The woman whose entire mental life has been organized, for years, around other people. That woman is who tonight is for. And I want to say something to her right now, before anything else, before any psychology or any framework or any gentle wisdom about self-discovery. I want to say, I see you. Not the version of you that everyone else sees. Not the capable one, the dependable one, the one who always shows up, the one who always knows what to do. Not the role. You, the actual you. The one underneath all of it. The one who has been so buried under the weight of being needed by everyone that you have almost forgotten she was there. She is still there. She has been there the entire time. And tonight, in the quiet, in the dark, with the list finally put down and the house finally still, she is going to get something she has not had in a very long time. She is going to be listened to, not the other way around. So settle in. Let the body release the posture it has been holding all day. Let the jaw unclench. Let the shoulders drop. Let the hands stop being ready to do something and simply rest. You do not need to do anything tonight. For the next hour, nothing is required of you. Just receive this. Let me tell you about a woman. I am not going to give her a name because the moment I do, some of you will decide the story is not about you. But her story is about almost every woman of a certain age who has spent most of her adult life giving herself away in small pieces until she looked up one day and realized she could not quite remember what she had started with. She got up at 6 in the morning for 23 years. Not because she is a morning person. She is not a morning person. She never was. Before the children, before the house, before the marriage that brought with it not just a husband but his family and their needs, and the particular social obligations that came with being part of that extended world. Before all of it, she used to stay up late reading. She used to love the night. She used to feel most alive after 10 o'clock when the world got quiet, and something in her that was too self-conscious during the day could finally move freely. But at some point, the 6 o'clock mornings became necessary. Someone had to be up. Someone had to make sure the children had what they needed before school. Someone had to think about dinner at the same time as thinking about breakfast. Someone had to hold the thread of the entire household in their head so that nothing was dropped. And she was the someone. She became the someone. Not through a single decision, but through the accumulation of 1,000 small moments in which it simply fell to her, and she handled it. And the handling of it became her role. And the role became her identity. And the identity became so thoroughly herself that she forgot it had not always been. She forgot she used to stay up late reading. She forgot the books she loved before she only had time for the books she thought she should read, or the books that had something to do with someone else's development or problem. She forgot the particular quality of her own mind in the evenings, unguarded and curious and following its own thread rather than the thread of everyone else's needs. She just forgot, not dramatically. Not in a moment of loss she could point to. Just gradually, the way a tide goes out so slowly, you do not notice it until you look down and your feet are on dry sand, and you cannot remember when you were last standing in water. Does any of that sound familiar to you? Not the specific details necessarily, the feeling, the sense of having arrived somewhere in your life, and looking back and realizing the journey did not entirely feel like yours. That you were present for it completely, devotedly, entirely present, but present in the way of someone who was always taking care of the journey rather than being on one of their own. Carl Jung had a specific name for what happened to this woman, for what has happened, in varying degrees, to almost every woman who has spent her primary adult years as the center of a family system, as the person around whom other people's lives were organized, as the one who holds the thread. He called it the loss of the self to the persona. The persona, in Jungian terms, is the social self. The mask we develop in response to what the world requires of us. Not a false self exactly, it contains real qualities, real capacities, real parts of who we are, but it is a partial self, a selection. The portion of us that was needed, that was useful, that earned its place. And the persona, when we live in it for long enough, without attending to what lives beneath it, begins to feel like the whole self. Begins to fill the entire interior until there is no room left for the parts of us that the persona does not include. The parts that were set aside because they were not needed, not useful, not part of the role. And that is the quiet catastrophe that happens to so many women. Not a sudden loss, a gradual displacement, the self slowly replaced by the role, the interior slowly colonized by the requirements of other people's lives. The woman who existed before the role with her own particular way of being in the world, her own desires and curiosities and capacities that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs, that woman slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing and without her quite noticing either, recedes. She is not gone. Jung was very clear about this. The persona can be total and the self can be buried, and the role can have replaced the person so thoroughly that the person herself has almost forgotten. But the self does not disappear. It waits, patient and intact and waiting, in the deepest layer of the interior, beneath all the years of giving, beneath all the roles and responsibilities and the particular exhaustion of a life spent primarily in service of other people's needs. It waits. And sometimes in moments exactly like this one, in the quiet before sleep, when the list has finally been put down and the house is still and there is nothing more to do and nothing more to give, sometimes in exactly those moments, something stirs, something that is not the caretaker, not the mother, not the wife or the daughter or the dependable one or the one who holds it all together, something older than all of those, something that predates every role, something that remembers, however faintly, who she was before the world required so much of her. That stirring is what tonight is for. Let me ask you something, and I want you to let the honest answer come rather than the answer that sounds right. When did you last do something that was entirely, completely, without any external justification, for yourself? Not for your health, because your health affects the people who depend on you. Not for your mental well-being, because your mental well-being makes you a better mother or partner or caretaker. Not the self-care that is really just maintenance, the minimum required to keep the machine running so it can keep serving everyone else. Something genuinely for yourself, because you wanted it, because it brought you something, because the you that existed before all the roles would have recognized it as belonging to her. Take a moment with that question. Do not rush past it to get to the next idea. When was the last time? If the answer comes quickly this morning, last week, regularly, then something is working. Something has been protected that many women lose entirely. But if the answer requires reaching back further than feels comfortable, if the honest answer is months or years, if there is a quality of unfamiliarity to the question itself, as if the very idea of doing something entirely for yourself feels indulgent or vaguely guilty or simply so disconnected from the actual texture of your daily life that it is almost theoretical, then you know something important about where you are right now, and that knowing is the beginning of tonight. Let me talk about something that nobody talks about directly enough. The specific, particular exhaustion of the woman who is always the strong one. Not just physical exhaustion, though that is real. Not just the tiredness of someone who does not sleep enough, or who carries more than her share of the practical labor of a household, but the deeper exhaustion. The exhaustion of never being allowed to not know what to do, of being the person everyone turns to, of being the container for everyone else's fear and uncertainty and need, while your own fear and uncertainty and need has nowhere to go. You have held other people's tears. You probably cannot count how many times you have held other people's tears, sat with someone while they fell apart, said the right thing, or close enough to the right thing, been present in the way that only you seem to know how to be present, absorbing the difficulty, managing the moment, keeping it from getting worse. And then you have gone home or walked back into the kitchen or gone to the bathroom for 3 minutes of privacy, and you have held yourself together because that is what you do. Because there was no one else to hold you, and because the holding together had to happen, and because you were, as you have always been, capable of it. But capable does not mean it costs nothing. Capable does not mean the weight does not accumulate. And somewhere in the accumulation, somewhere in the years of being the one who holds everything together, something gets set aside. Not consciously, not with a decision, but because there was simply not enough space, not enough time, not enough of her left over after everyone else had taken what they needed, her own grief, set aside. To be felt later, when there was time, and later never quite came. Her own anger, managed away. Because someone had to be the reasonable one, because her anger had no safe place to land, because being angry required the luxury of not needing to hold the room together. Her own dreams, not the large dramatic dreams, just the small private ones, the thing she thought she might do one day, the place she thought she might go, the version of herself she thought she was building toward, back when she was young enough to believe she was building toward something of her own, set aside, suspended, deferred indefinitely, with the good intention of returning to them when things were less demanding, when the children were older, when her mother did not need so much, when the job settled down, when the relationship was in a better place, when things were less demanding, and things were never less demanding. Because the specific nature of a life organized around other people's needs is that the needs do not diminish, they change shape. The children get older and their needs change but do not disappear. The parents get older and their needs increase. The relationship requires what relationships always require: attention and energy, and the particular labor of being truly present with another person. The job does not settle down because jobs do not settle down. The world does not become less demanding, and somewhere in the continuous present tense of all that demand, the deferred self stayed deferred. The dreams stayed suspended, the grief stayed unfelt, the anger stayed managed. The woman underneath the role stayed buried, patient and intact and waiting while the years went by. This is not a story about victimhood. I want to be clear about that. The woman I am describing is not a victim of her own life. She made choices. Real choices, many of them, from love and commitment and genuine desire to be the kind of person who shows up for the people who matter to her. She would make many of the same choices again. But choices have costs, and the specific costs of the choices that organized a life around other people's needs have often not been named honestly, have been papered over with the narrative of the selfless woman, the devoted mother, the strong one, the dependable one, a narrative that is partly true and that also, in its consistent elevation of the giving over the cost of the giving, has allowed a kind of quiet loss to go unacknowledged for decades. Tonight it is being acknowledged, not to generate guilt in the people who were loved, not to turn the devotion retroactively into martyrdom, but simply to name what is true, to give it language, to allow the actual cost to be felt rather than managed away one more time. You gave a lot, more than you were always given back. More than was always acknowledged, more than was always fair. And somewhere in the giving, you got lost, not because the giving was wrong, but because the giving, sustained without enough replenishment, without enough reciprocity, without enough attention directed toward the interior that was doing all the giving, that kind of giving slowly hollows a person, and a hollow person is not a better caretaker. They are not a better mother or partner or friend. They are someone giving from an increasingly empty place, maintaining the appearance of fullness while something essential has quietly run dry. You know this feeling, the giving that does not come from abundance anymore, but from habit, from obligation, from the particular inertia of a role so thoroughly established that stopping it would require a kind of internal reorganization that seems impossible from where you currently stand. That is where many women arrive at your stage of life, not in crisis, not broken, but hollow in a specific, quiet way that they might describe, if they were being honest, as tired in a way that sleep does not fix, or as a sense that something is missing that they cannot quite name, or as the strange, slightly guilty feeling of being surrounded by the life they built and finding, in some moments, that it does not feel entirely like theirs. If any of that resonates, stay with me, because Jung understood this specific experience in women with a precision that still feels radical. He understood that the traditional structure of a woman's life, organized around relationship and family and the caretaking of others, was not inherently wrong. That the love it expressed was real, that the choices it embodied were genuine, but he also understood the cost. The specific cost to the psyche of spending the first half of life primarily in service of other people's development while the woman's own development waited. And he identified, in his clinical work and in his theoretical writing, a specific moment that arrives for many women somewhere in the middle of their lives. He called it the awakening of the second half. The moment when the exterior structure, the one that was built around children and family and the various roles that organize the first half of life, begins to change. When the children leave or become more independent, when the marriage enters a new phase or ends, when the parents who needed care are gone, when the job that defined so much of the identity is done or changing, when the structure that has held everything in place begins, one piece at a time, to shift. And in the space that the shift creates, in the strange, disorienting, often frightening gap that opens when the roles begin to change, something surfaces. The self, the real one, the one that has been waiting, not triumphantly, not with a clear sense of direction or an obvious agenda, but with a quality of presence that is unmistakable, a feeling of something unfinished, something that was suspended and is now pressing forward, something that says, quietly but insistently, in the way that things speak when they have been patient for a very long time, it is your turn now. Are you in that moment, or approaching it, or looking back at the beginning of it and wondering what to do with what has surfaced? Because the surfacing can be confusing. It can feel like loss rather than discovery. It can feel like depression or restlessness or a vague dissatisfaction that seems ungrateful given everything you have been given. It can feel like something is wrong rather than something finally becoming possible. But Jung would say, and this is the most important thing I want you to hear tonight, the surfacing is not a problem. It is a completion. The beginning of the second chapter that the first chapter's structure was always meant to eventually make room for. The chapter that is yours, not defined by who needs you, not organized around what you can provide, not shaped by the roles that were necessary and real and genuinely expressing your love, but yours, in the way that only the interior is yours, in the way that the actual self, finally given space to move, is the most genuinely yours thing there is. That chapter is not behind you, it is in front of you, and tonight is one of the first pages. Let me sit with you in something specific now, something that I think you have never had anyone sit with you in properly. The moment the last child left, or the moment you first really understood that the job of mothering, which had organized so much of your life for so long, was changing in a fundamental way, that they were okay, that they did not need you in the daily, constant, you are the center of their world way they needed you when they were young, that the role which had been the primary organizing principle of your identity for decades was shifting into something different. Something necessary still, and loving still, but different. How did that feel? Not the answer you gave when people asked. The actual feeling, in the body, in the quiet moments. For many women, it felt like grief. A specific, unexpected, almost embarrassing grief because, are you not supposed to be happy? Is this not what you work toward? Healthy, independent children who can live their own lives? Is it not strange and vaguely selfish to grieve the very outcome you devoted yourself to producing? Yes. And also, it is the most human thing in the world, because the grief was not for them. It was for the role, for the version of yourself that was organized around their need for you, for the particular identity, the mother who was needed, the center of the household, the indispensable one that was, in the very success of the project, gently and permanently dismantled. And into the space left by that identity, into the quiet that followed the departure of the structure that had held everything in place, surfaced something that many women describe as a strange and vertiginous feeling. Who am I now? Not rhetorically, actually, with genuine uncertainty. Looking at a life that has been cleared of its central organizing principle and finding, in the clearing, a person they do not entirely recognize. Not a bad person, not an unhappy person, but a person who has been so thoroughly defined by her function within a family system that the question of who she is outside that function is genuinely, uncomfortably open. Jung called this one of the great developmental crises of the second half of life. Not a crisis in the catastrophic sense, but a genuine confrontation with the self that had been deferred. The meeting, finally, with the interior that had been waiting. And the meeting can feel destabilizing before it feels liberating, because the interior that has been waiting is not tidy. It is not the carefully managed, always competent, never falling apart interior of the woman who has been the strong one for so long. It contains the grief that was deferred, the anger that was managed, the dreams that were suspended, the parts of her that were too inconvenient or too threatening or simply too her to be given space during the years when the space was needed for everyone else. Meeting all of that finally, honestly, without the buffer of the role to deflect attention from it is the work of the second half. And it is hard. And it is necessary. And on the other side of it is something that most women in the first half of life cannot fully imagine. Not because it is unimaginable, but because the first half leaves so little time for imagining it. Something that might be called, simply and inadequately, being yourself. Actually, finally, without apology or qualifier, or the invisible disclaimer that says I would be more fully myself, but someone needs me being yourself. That is what is available. On the other side of the meeting, on the other side of the grief and the anger and the long-deferred accounting of what was given and what was lost and what remains. Yourself, as you actually are, not as the role required, not as the family needed, not as the marriage shaped, as you were before any of it, as you have continued to be, underneath all of it, patient and intact, waiting for exactly this. Let me ask you another question. This one is harder. Who were you before you became responsible for everyone? Not a teenager necessarily, not the version of yourself before adulthood and its real demands, but the woman before the full weight of the caretaking fell, before the particular gravity of other people's needs organized her days, before the role became the primary identity. What did she love? What did she do when she had an afternoon entirely to herself, not stolen time, not time that was really someone else's time that she was borrowing guiltily, but genuinely unaccountable time? What did she do with it? What made her laugh? Not the social laugh, the one that manages the room and smooths the moment, the real one, the one that came from somewhere genuine and surprised even her sometimes with how good it felt. What did she think about when she was alone and not thinking about anyone else? What did she want that she stopped wanting because wanting it required more of herself than the role could spare? These are not small questions. Do not rush past them. Let them open something. Let them reach into whatever they need to reach into and bring back whatever they find. Because somewhere in the answers is the woman who has been waiting. Not gone, waiting, and she deserves to be found. Let me tell you about something Jung observed in his clinical practice that I find almost unbearably precise in its accuracy. He observed that the women who came to him in the middle years of their lives, the women who were experiencing the disorientation and the grief and the strange emptiness of the identity shift, almost none of them came in angry. Almost none of them came in with the clear, clean, appropriately directed outrage of someone who had given too much and received too little for too long. They came in guilty. Guilty for not being happier with what they had. Guilty for feeling empty when they had so much. Guilty for the grief that did not make obvious sense. Guilty for the anger they could feel underneath the surface but could not justify expressing because expressing it would mean pointing it at the people they loved. They had turned everything inward. The grief, the anger, the unmet needs, the decades of deferred selfhood. All of it turned inward rather than outward, because outward would have meant conflict or disappointment, or the specific terror of being seen as ungrateful or selfish, or not the person everyone believed her to be. So it sat inside, all of it, as a kind of low-level depression that was not quite depression, a heaviness that was not quite sadness, a flatness that was not quite absence of feeling. Something that was difficult to name because it had no single cause and no obvious direction and no clear remedy. Jung called this the unlived life pressing against the surface. Everything that was suppressed, deferred, managed away, set aside for later, all of it accumulated in the interior and eventually began to exert pressure, not as specific memories or specific desires, but as a general, persistent, nameless heaviness. A knowing that something was missing that could not be named because naming it would require admitting how much had been quietly lost. That pressure is not an illness. It is not a dysfunction. It is the self insisting on being acknowledged. It is the interior pressing forward with all the accumulated weight of years of being overlooked, not by other people, but by you. By the woman who was so occupied with everyone else's interior that her own was never quite given the attention it needed. The remedy is not a dramatic change, not the blowing up of the life that was built, not the abandonment of the people who were loved and are loved still. Jung never suggested that. He understood that the life had real value, that the relationships were real, that the love was real. The remedy is attention, the specific, sustained, genuinely interested turning of the gaze toward the interior, toward what is actually there, toward the grief that needs to be felt and the anger that needs to be acknowledged and the dreams that need to be visited even if they can no longer be pursued in the form they originally took, toward the woman who has been waiting, toward the self that has been patient for so long. Just attention, just presence. Just the simple, enormous act of beginning to treat your own interior with the same seriousness and care that you have been giving to everyone else's for all these years. That is the work of the second half of life. For a woman who has lived the first half the way you have lived it, it is the most important work available. Not a luxury, not self-indulgence, not something to get to eventually when everyone else's needs have been met. Now, this, the turning of the attention. You have been doing it tonight. In this willingness to lie in the dark and let something reach you that is entirely about your own interior, without anyone else's need organizing the hour, without a function to perform or a role to fulfill or a problem to solve, just you, listening to something that is only about you. That is not nothing. For someone who has spent as long as you have spent with the attention directed outward, this is significant. This is the beginning. Let me stay with you in something that I think is almost never said directly. You are tired of being the one who remembers. Not just the appointments and the birthdays and the grocery lists, though yes, those too, but the emotional remembering. The keeping track of how everyone is feeling, the monitoring of the room, the noticing of the shift in someone's mood before they have named it themselves. The quiet, constant, invisible labor of being emotionally attuned to everyone around you. Nobody taught you to do this. You just did it because it was necessary, because someone had to. Because you were good at it, and because being good at something tends to mean you keep being asked to do it. But being good at the emotional labor of a household does not mean it is free. It is not free. It costs something every time. The sustained attention required to track another person's emotional state, to notice and respond and manage and smooth and be present in the particular way that emotional attunement requires, that costs something from the interior that is finite. That runs out if it is not replenished, and the replenishment requires the same thing being directed toward you, someone tracking your emotional state. someone noticing your mood before you have named it, someone managing the room in such a way that you do not all directed toward you, someone tracking your emotional state, someone noticing your mood before you have named it, someone managing the room in such a way that you do not always have to, someone giving you the particular gift of being attended to the way you have attended to everyone else. Has that happened consistently? In proportion to what you have given? For most women in this position, the honest answer is no. Not because the people around them do not love them, but because the role of the emotionally attuned one is, by its nature, not a role that tends to generate reciprocity. The person who is always fine, who always knows what to do, who never seems to need anything, that person gets less offered to them because nothing seems to be needed. The competence becomes its own barrier to being cared for, and so the tiredness accumulates, the emotional labor that was never replenished, the interior that gave and gave without equivalent return. Until the tiredness is not just the tiredness of today or this week, but the accumulated tiredness of years, the weight of all the unreciprocated attunement, the cost of all the invisible labor that nobody tallied because it was done too quietly and too skillfully to be noticed as labor at all. That tiredness is not weakness. That tiredness is completely legitimate. It is the entirely reasonable consequence of an imbalance that was sustained for too long without being named. Name it tonight, not to anyone else, just to yourself. Just in the honest interior acknowledgement that it is real and it has been real and it deserves to be called what it is. You are tired, not just in the ordinary way, in the deep way, the way that requires more than sleep to address, the way that requires attention to the interior, the way that requires someone starting with yourself to finally, genuinely attend to you. Start with yourself. That is not resignation. That is the most practical, available response to a situation in which external reciprocity may not arrive in the proportion needed. You can give yourself the attention, not as a substitute for connection, not instead of asking for what you need from the people around you, but as the foundation, as the beginning of treating your own interior as worthy of the care that you have given so freely to every other interior in your vicinity. Your interior is worthy of that care, as worthy as anyone's. More, if we are being honest about the proportion of care that has been flowing outward relative to what has been flowing in, you deserve to be attended to, starting with yourself, starting tonight. And now, I want to ask you something that I want you to stay with for a long time. Not answer quickly, not manage into something comfortable, just stay with. If the woman you were before all the roles, the one who existed before she became primarily responsible for other people, if she could see your life right now, what would she say? Not about the people in it, not about the choices that were made, but about you, about the woman you have become, about what was kept and what was lost, about what she would recognize and what she would mourn. Would she be proud? Yes, probably, in many ways. The love is real. The commitment is real. The way you showed up for people is extraordinary and real and worth being proud of. But would she also be grieved by something? Would there be something she would look at and feel a kind of sorrow for? Something she would wish had been different? Not the external circumstances, but something internal. Some quality of you that she remembers and that is harder to find now. Some aliveness or freedom or particular way of being in yourself that the years of responsibility slowly covered over. What is that thing? Let it be named, even just in the privacy of your own interior, even just as a feeling without words. Let it surface and be present and be real rather than immediately managed away. That is her. The woman who existed before the roles, surfacing in the grief for what was covered, reminding you, gently but persistently, that she has been there all along. She is not a ghost. She is not someone you have to mourn. She is someone you have to find. And the finding is simpler than you might expect. It does not require enormous amounts of time or a complete reorganization of your life or the dramatic declaration that from now on everything will be different. It requires a quality of attention, directed inward, consistently, even briefly, even in stolen 10-minute increments between everything else that the day demands, What did she love? Go back to that. Find one thing, one small thing that was hers, that belonged to her before it belonged to the role, that she gave up not because she no longer cared about it, but because there was simply no room for it. And make room somewhere. Not for a perfect version of it, the version that requires 3 hours of uninterrupted time and a perfectly organized schedule and the complete resolution of everything else that needs attention. The imperfect version, the 10 minutes, the 1 page, the small garden, the walk with no destination, the cup of tea in the actual quiet, not the quiet that is really just the between tasks. The small thing, the genuine thing, the thing that is not for anyone else. That is the beginning of the finding. That is the beginning of the chapter that is yours. Let me talk about something else that is almost never said. You are allowed to need things. This sounds obvious. It is not obvious. Not for a woman who has spent decades organizing her life around being needed rather than needing. Not for someone whose entire identity has been built around competence and dependability and the particular self-sufficiency of the person who never requires anything, because requiring something from someone would mean being a burden. And being a burden is one of the things you have been most determined never to be. Where did that come from? The absolute, sometimes irrational, deeply felt imperative to not be a burden. For most women, it comes from early. From a family system that needed her to be capable and not needy rather than young and requiring. From a parent who had too much of their own to carry to have room for hers. From the message, communicated in the particular way that families communicate the messages that shape us, not with words, not directly, but through the 1,000 small transactions of daily life, that her needs were manageable and other people's needs were real. And so she managed. She managed her own needs. She made herself small in the specific, particular way of someone who has learned that need equals burden, and burden equals loss of love, and loss of love is the one thing that cannot be risked. She became self-sufficient, she became capable, she became the strong one, and she got very good at not needing things. So good that eventually she stopped feeling the needs, stopped noticing them. Stopped registering them as real, because unacknowledged needs do not disappear, they simply go underground. They become part of the unlived life, the pressure that has no name. Tonight, in the quiet, in the honest dark, what do you need? Not what should you need, not what is reasonable to need or what you would be comfortable admitting to needing. What do you actually need? In the private, unmanaged, nobody watching honesty of this moment, rest? Real rest, not the maintenance rest that keeps you functioning, but genuine, extended, unstructured rest that belongs entirely to you and produces nothing and serves no one except your own replenishment. To be heard, not to have your problems solved or your feelings explained or someone tell you what you should do, just to be genuinely, quietly, fully heard by someone who is not waiting for their turn to speak. To matter in a way that is not about your function. To be valued not for what you do or what you provide or how well you keep everything together, but simply for who you are, the particular, irreducible, entirely yourself who you have always been underneath everything. These are not small needs. They are not unreasonable needs. They are among the most fundamental needs a human being can have, and they have probably been unmet in varying degrees for a very long time. Naming them is the first step. Not the step of demanding them from someone who may or may not be capable of providing them, but the step of acknowledging to yourself that they are real, that you have them, that they matter, that the fact that they have not been met does not mean they do not deserve to be. You deserve to have your needs met, not instead of the people around you, alongside them, with the same seriousness and attentiveness that you have brought to theirs. That is not radical, that is basic. It has just been missing for a very long time. Now let me speak gently about something that is perhaps the heaviest thing tonight, the thing that lives in the room but that nobody says. There may be relationships in your life, perhaps the most central ones, in which you have never been fully seen, not because the people who love you do not love you, but because the role was so thoroughly established, so early, and so consistently reinforced, that there was never space for them to see past it to the person it covered, because you were so skilled at the role that no one had reason to look underneath, because you never showed them the underneath, because showing the underneath required the kind of vulnerability that the strong one is never supposed to have. And so they love who they believe you to be, which is partly you, but not entirely, not the parts that were covered, not the grief and the anger and the longing and the unlived desires, not the woman underneath the role who has needs and limitations and a rich, complex interior that has never been fully offered to another person because offering it fully would have required them to accommodate it, and accommodation, real accommodation of her actual needs, was not something she ever felt entirely entitled to ask for. This is one of the loneliest things a person can experience. To be loved by people who love a partial version of you. To be surrounded by care that is directed at the performance rather than the performer. To be genuinely cherished in the role while the self inside it is essentially unknown. And the loneliness of this is specific. It is not the loneliness of someone who has no one. It is the loneliness of someone who is surrounded by people and still somehow in the interior, in the real place, alone. Jung called this the loneliness of the persona, the isolation of the person who has lived in their role for so long that even in the midst of their closest relationships, the actual self is not present. Not because the love is false, because the vehicle for receiving it, the real self, the one beneath the role, has been so effectively covered that the love, however genuine, cannot quite reach it. This is not unfixable, it is not permanent. But it requires something that feels frightening to the woman who has spent her life being the competent, dependable, never needing one. It requires being seen, actually seen, in the parts that were covered. In the weakness and the need and the grief and the anger and the particular, irreplaceable specific reality of who she is when she is not performing the role. This begins always with being seen by yourself. With the interior work of actually looking at what is there rather than managing it away. Before anyone else can see it, before you can offer it to another person, before the loneliness of the persona can be addressed in any relationship, it must first be met in your own interior, you seeing yourself, honestly, with the kind of patient, non-judgmental attention that you have given so freely to everyone else. That is what tonight is. And it is the beginning of making the loneliness less. Not instantly, not dramatically, but in the way that all real change happens gradually, through the accumulation of honest moments, through the incremental building of the relationship with your own interior that makes genuine connection with others finally, properly possible. You cannot be truly seen until you have truly seen yourself. Start there. You are starting there tonight. Let your body be completely at rest now. Feel how heavy it is. Feel how much it has carried today and every day for all the days before this. Feel the weight of it not as burden but as evidence. Evidence of a life fully lived, of a presence completely given, of a woman who showed up entirely for the people she loved. You showed up for them. Now show up for yourself, not by abandoning anything, not by taking anything away. Simply by beginning to include yourself in the circle of people you attend to, by directing some of the enormous capacity for care that you possess, that extraordinary, bottomless, genuinely extraordinary capacity inward, toward your own interior, toward the woman who has been waiting. She has been so patient. She deserves to be found, and the finding does not require a different life. It requires a different quality of attention within the life you have. The morning minutes that could be used for the list redirected toward the interior instead. The question asked of yourself that you have always asked of everyone else: how are you? How are you really? What do you need today? Asked and answered honestly. The small things, given back to the self that gave them up. That is the practice. And it is enough. It is more than enough. Because the woman underneath has not been waiting for a grand gesture. She has been waiting for the simplest thing: to be noticed, to be remembered, to have someone finally, honestly, with genuine interest turn toward her and say, "I see you. Tell me who you are. Tell me what you love. Tell me what you have been carrying. Tell me what you have not been allowed to want. You can be that someone, starting tonight. Starting in the quiet of this particular dark, before sleep takes you, with the simple, honest act of turning the attention inward and saying, I am here, I am listening. You have been waiting long enough. Tell me who you are, she will answer. She has been waiting for the question. Let the night hold you now. Let the body rest completely. Let the list stay where you left it. Let the needs of tomorrow wait for tomorrow. Tonight is yours. This hour, this quiet, this turning toward yourself, this is yours. You have given so much for so long. Receive this, just this. The Jungian hour is grateful you are here tonight. Grateful for the woman who stayed, who listened, who let something true reach her in the quiet before sleep. You are more than the role. You have always been more. And the chapter that belongs entirely to you, the one that is not organized around anyone else's need, that does not require your function to justify your presence, that begins with the simple, extraordinary fact of who you are, that chapter is not behind you. It is in front of you. It may be, if you let it, the best one yet. Sleep deeply, fellow Jungians. Good night. See you in the next one. But you are still here, and so I want to stay with you a little longer, because I think there is something that needs to be said about the specific experience of sitting alone in a quiet house, and I think you know exactly what I mean. The children have grown, or the house has emptied in some other way, or even if it has not emptied entirely, there are moments, evenings, Sunday afternoons, the particular quality of a Tuesday that has no specific demands when the quiet arrives. When there is nothing that urgently needs doing, when the structure that organized everything falls momentarily away, and you are left sitting in a room that is yours, and a life that is yours, and a self that is unfamiliar. Not frightening, not terrible, just unfamiliar, like walking into a room you have not been in for a long time and finding the furniture slightly different from how you remembered it, slightly foreign, as if the room belongs to someone you used to know rather than to you. That feeling, that quality of strangeness in your own life, is one of the most common experiences among women who have spent their primary adult years defined by their role within a family. And it is almost never talked about, because it sounds ungrateful. Because how can you feel like a stranger in your own life when your own life contains so many things and people worth being grateful for? Because the admission of it feels like a criticism of the life itself rather than an honest description of an interior experience. But it is not a criticism, it is information. It is the interior signaling that the fit between the outer life and the inner self has changed, that the structure which organized everything for so long has begun to shift, that the woman inside the structure has been waiting for the structure to create space for her, and the structure, on its own, does not know how to do that. The structure needs her to create the space. The interior needs her attention before the outer life can change to accommodate it. She has to meet herself first. Then the life begins to reorganize around the meeting. This is backward from how most people expect change to work. Most people expect that when the outer circumstances change, when the children leave, when the marriage shifts, when the job ends, when the structure reorganizes itself externally, then the inner shift will follow automatically, that the self will emerge on its own once the space is there. But it does not work that way. The self that was buried does not simply surface because the load lightened. It surfaces because someone reached for it. Because the woman who buried it turns toward the interior with genuine attention and genuine desire to find what is there. The reaching is the work, and it is simple work. Beautifully, frustratingly simple. Not easy. Simple is not the same as easy, but simple in that it does not require resources you do not have, does not require time you have not been given, does not require permission from anyone or the right external circumstances or the resolution of all the other things that still need attention. It requires only the willingness to begin, to ask the first question. What do I actually feel right now? Not what should I feel? What do I actually feel? To do the first small thing, the one that belongs to her and not to the role. The 10 minutes, the 1 page, the single honest conversation with yourself. To give yourself, for one small increment of time, the same quality of presence that you have given to everyone else for all these years. That is the beginning. And beginnings, when they are real, are everything. Now I want to speak to something that many women in your position carry but rarely examine directly. The loss of the body. Not the body as appearance, though there are layers of grief there too, real and worth acknowledging, but the body as home, as the place you actually live, as the interior experience of being in a physical self. For years, the body has been primarily functional. It woke up early and carried things and fed people and drove and cleaned and worked and sat up late and stayed strong and did not fall apart when falling apart would have been entirely justifiable. It was a vehicle for the role. Capable, durable, largely ignored in the specific sense of being attended to only in terms of what it could continue to produce. And the body holds things. This is not metaphorical, it is literal. Everything that was not processed emotionally, every grief that was deferred, every anger that was swallowed, every need that was suppressed, lives in the body. In the tension of the shoulders that never fully releases, in the tightness in the chest that is not quite anxiety and not quite sadness, but something that does not have a name. In the exhaustion that is not in the muscles but somewhere deeper, in the cellular reality of a physical self that has been asked to carry too much for too long without adequate replenishment. The body is trying to tell you something. It has been trying for a long time. Not in dramatic ways, though sometimes it speaks dramatically, through illness or injury that forces the stopping that would never have been chosen voluntarily. But usually in the quiet, persistent, easily ignored language of a physical self that is overdrawn. That needs rest of a specific kind. That needs to be touched not because it is useful, but because it exists. That needs to be in water or in air or in movement that is chosen for pleasure rather than for maintenance. When did you last move your body for joy? Not for health, not for maintenance, not for the particular form of discipline that is really another version of performing adequacy. For the specific, animal pleasure of moving because it feels good? When did you last let your body be warm and loose and unhurried? Give it permission to take up its actual space rather than the compressed, efficient, always ready space of someone on standby. When did you last pay it the kind of attention that is not monitoring, not checking for problems or managing symptoms, but genuine, appreciative, non-utilitarian attention? As if it were not a vehicle but a home, as if it deserved care not because of what it could continue to produce, but simply because it is yours and it has been here all along, carrying you. The body is one of the first things women in this pattern rediscover, not because it is superficial, it is anything but superficial, but because it is immediate, it is where you actually live. And attending to it gently, generously, with a kind of warm, non-demanding attention that asks nothing of it except that it be itself, is one of the most direct available paths back to the interior. The body knows. It has always known. It has been speaking in the language of sensation and tension and fatigue, and the occasional, unexpected, surprising aliveness of a moment when you were genuinely present in your physical self rather than just driving it. Listen to it. That is the invitation. What does your body want tonight? Not need in the functional sense. Want. In the simple, uncomplicated way that a body knows what it wants when it is given permission to want. Rest, warmth, the specific weight of the blanket in the right place. The particular quality of lying completely still and feeling the body settle rather than the body being held ready for the next thing. Give it that, just that. The honest, generous, genuine gift of letting it rest because it has earned it and because you value it and because it is yours. That is self-care in its truest form, not the performance of it. The actual thing. And now let me speak to one more thing before the silence takes you. The next chapter. I want to be careful here because the language of next chapters and new beginnings can feel hollow to a woman who is genuinely tired, who has heard the motivational version of this enough times to be appropriately skeptical, Who does not need someone telling her to go find herself or reinvent herself or discover her passion or any of the other phrases that make individual effort sound like the solution to structural inequities that were never her fault to begin with? So I am not saying any of that. What I am saying is quieter than that, and I think truer. The next chapter does not require you to become a different person. It does not require a dramatic reinvention or a bucket list or the construction of an entirely new identity from the ruins of the old one. It does not require you to stop being the woman who loves deeply and gives generously and shows up for the people in her life. It requires something much simpler and much more revolutionary. It requires that you are included in the circle of people you care for, in the allocation of the attention and energy you give so freely, in the simple daily consideration of what is needed and what matters, which has, for so long, been dominated by everyone else's answer to those questions rather than yours. Include yourself. That is the whole of it, not instead of them, alongside them, with the same seriousness and attentiveness, with the same genuine interest in your well-being that you have directed toward theirs. What do you need today? Not in addition to everything else, not as a reward for getting through everything else, as part of everything else. As one of the real, legitimate, genuinely important items in the daily accounting, what do you want? Not the managed-down version of the want, the actual want. The one that has been living in the deferred file for years, getting smaller under the pressure of the practical, barely surviving under the weight of the always more important. What would feel like a genuine expression of who you are rather than a performance of what you are for? These are the questions of the next chapter, not asked once and answered dramatically, asked repeatedly, quietly, in the morning and the evening and the moments in between. Building, through the daily asking, the relationship with your own interior that was deferred for so long. That relationship is the chapter. The asking is the whole of it. And what you find when you ask what surfaces when the attention is genuinely directed inward rather than managed towards something more comfortable is not frightening. It is not the vast, unmanageable darkness that the avoidance of it made it seem. It is a person, a specific, irreplaceable, entirely real person who has been here all along, waiting for you to come home to her. You are coming home, not dramatically, quietly, in the dark. In the honest acknowledgement of what has been given and what has been lost and what remains and what is possible from here. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is the beginning of everything. Sleep now. The deepest, most complete, most genuinely resting sleep. Let the body release what it has been holding. Let the mind dissolve into the quiet beneath all its thinking. You have been heard tonight. Really heard. In the parts of you that are almost never listened to. In the interior that has been waiting for exactly this quality of attention. You are not only what you do for other people. You have never been only that. Underneath everything you have done and given and provided and managed, there is a woman, real and specific and irreplaceable and deserving and still there, still there. Find her. She is not far. Good night, fellow Jungians. Rest well. You have earned this rest more than you know. The Jungian hour, one night at a time. See you in the next one. There is a specific moment I want to talk about. One that I think you have probably experienced but may never have had language for. The moment when everyone finally goes to bed. When the house settles. When the last light turns off down the hall. When the sounds of other people moving through the space go quiet. When it is just you, finally, in the stillness. What happens in you in that moment? For many women, the first thing that happens is a kind of involuntary release. The muscles in the face soften. The posture that has been held all day attentive, available, arranged in the way of someone who might be needed at any moment, that posture lets go. Something in the chest unclenches. Something that has been braced relaxes, and for a few minutes sometimes, there is something that feels almost like herself, not the mother or the partner or the capable one, just her, in the dark, in the quiet, with nobody needing anything, nobody watching, Nobody requiring the performance of okayness or competence or the particular warmth of someone who has it together. Just her. Briefly. In that handful of minutes before sleep. And then for many women something else happens. The list reassembles. The mind goes back to what needs to happen tomorrow. The worry about one of the children, or the parent, or the thing at work, or the relationship, or the finances. The mind turns off, picks up where it left down when the conscious mind was occupied during the day. And the few minutes of herself are over. And sleep, when it comes to the manager, the planner, the woman whose unconscious runs the same program her conscious mind runs all day. Does this resonate? I want to offer you something for those minutes. Not a technique exactly, not something that requires effort or produces anything or serves any function, just a small redirection. In those few minutes when the house is quiet and the performance is over and you are, however briefly, just yourself, use them for the question, not the list question, the other question. The one we have been in all night. Who am I right now, in this moment, before anyone needs anything? And let whatever comes, come. Without direction, without the pressure of needing it to be anything in particular, without the judgment that would immediately minimize or dismiss or explain away whatever surfaces. Just let it be present. The exhaustion that is specific and deep and has been there for longer than today. The thing that was felt earlier and pushed through without time to address. The small grief of the moment that passed without being acknowledged. The fragment of desire, I wanted to do that. I wish I had time for that. I remember when I used to, that came and went without landing. Let it land now, in this quiet, in these few minutes that are yours. That is all. That is the whole practice for tonight. Not a transformation, not a revelation. Just the small, daily, enormously important act of giving yourself a few minutes of honest interior attention before sleep. You have given everyone else their day. These minutes are yours. Use them well. Now, I want to talk about something that lives in the specific experience of being a woman who has spent years as the emotional center of a household. Something that is rarely acknowledged as its own category of loss. You became invisible, not to everyone. Not completely, but in a specific way. The way that happens to people who are so consistently and reliably present, who show up so thoroughly for every demand, every need, every call, that they begin to be taken for granted in the particular way that the reliable are always taken for granted. The sun rises every morning, and you do not thank the sun. You do not notice the sun. You notice when the sun does not rise. You notice the absence. The presence is simply assumed. You became the sun, in your household, in your family, in the various systems you served, always there, always rising. Your presence so consistent and so thorough that it became the condition rather than the gift. And conditions do not get thanked. Conditions do not get seen. Conditions are simply the reality of how things are, requiring acknowledgement only in their absence. How many years has it been since someone really saw you? Not the role, not the function, not what you provide or how well you provide it, or whether the house is running or the children are okay or the appointments are handled. You, the actual woman, with her own interior and her own weight and her own unmet longings that have never been directly addressed by the people who benefit most from her constant presence. This is one of the most painful and least acknowledged experiences of women in this position. The invisibility that comes from being too reliably present. The particular loneliness of the person who gives everything and whose giving becomes so normalized that it is no longer seen as giving, just as the way things are. And the tragedy of this invisibility is not just that it is painful, though it is deeply, genuinely painful. The tragedy is that it generates a specific kind of resignation. A woman who has been invisible for long enough stops expecting to be seen. Stops reaching toward visibility, stops doing the things that might create the possibility of being genuinely witnessed, because the accumulated history of not being witnessed has taught her, in the cellular way that repeated experience teaches, that reaching is not worth the exposure. So she stops reaching. She manages herself downward. She asks for less. She expects less. She adjusts her interior to fit the available space, which has been shrinking incrementally for years. And a woman who has adjusted her interior to fit an available space that is much smaller than she actually is. That woman has a specific quality to her stillness, a quality of containment that looks like serenity from the outside, but that feels, from the inside, like compression. Like all the parts of herself that do not fit the available space are being held very tightly, very carefully, to prevent them from spilling out where they are not welcome. That compression is exhausting. More exhausting than the practical labor, more exhausting than the emotional labor, more exhausting than any specific thing she does. It is the exhaustion of being too much for the space she is in, of managing the excess of herself that the space cannot accommodate, of contracting, daily, incrementally, to maintain the fit. If this is your experience, if there is a quality of compression in your interior that you recognize in this description, then what is needed is not more compression, not more skillful management of the excess, not finding better ways to fit. What is needed is more space, not necessarily from the people around you, though that too is worth addressing in its own time and its own way. But primarily first, foundationally from yourself, the permission to take up your actual space, in your own interior, in the relationship with yourself that does not require compression, in the quality of self-attention that allows all of you, not the edited version, not the version that fits the actual whole excess of you that has been managed away for so long. You are not too much. You have never been too much. You were simply in spaces that were too small. The interior is not too small. The interior is vast. It has room for all of you. For the grief and the anger and the longing and the dreams and the full, uncompressed reality of a woman who has lived a lot and felt a lot and given a lot, and who has an interior that is as complex and rich and worthy of attention as any interior that has ever been given serious care. Give it serious care, your own, starting tonight. Let it be as large as it actually is. Let her take up all the space she actually takes up. She has been compressed long enough. Let me tell you about something Jung observed about the lives of women that was, for his time, remarkably precise and prescient. He noticed that many women, particularly women who had spent the first half of their lives in the traditionally feminine role of caretaker and relational center, experienced a specific kind of psychological emergency in their middle years. Not the crisis of having too little, but of having too much that had never been expressed. Too much interior life, accumulated over decades without adequate outlet. Too much self, compressed into a role that had never been large enough to contain all of it. And this emergency, when it arrived, looked different depending on the woman. Sometimes it looked like depression, sometimes like restlessness or anxiety, sometimes like the apparently sudden desire to change everything, the marriage, the living situation, the entire structure of the life that had been carefully built. Sometimes like a kind of grief that had no obvious object. Sometimes like the quiet, persistent feeling of having missed something important without being able to name what it was. Jung understood all of these as versions of the same thing. The self, which had been waiting patiently, becoming impatient. The compressed interior reaching a point of pressure where it could no longer be contained by the available structure. The woman inside, the role pressing forward with the accumulated weight of everything she had been and had not been allowed to express. He called this the individuation crisis of the second half. And he understood it not as a breakdown, but as a breakthrough. As the self demanding finally, insistently, in whatever way it had available to it to be met. The meeting is the work. And the work of the second half of a woman's life is, in Jung's framework, one of the most important and most neglected forms of human development. The development of the woman herself as a distinct and irreducible individual, not as a function within a system, not as a role within a family, not as a service provider within a marriage, as a person, complete, complex, with her own relationship to her own depths. That development does not have an age limit. It does not close at a certain point and become unavailable. It is available right now, to you, in the exact life you are in, with all the constraints and the history and the accumulated roles that will not disappear overnight. It begins where you are, with what you have, in the time available. It begins with exactly what tonight has been, the honest looking, the genuine question, the small brave act of turning the attention inward rather than outward, and letting what is there be real rather than managed. You have been doing that tonight. Whatever else is true, you have been doing that tonight. And that is the beginning of the development that has been waiting for you. The individuation that the first half of your life was too full to allow. The encounter with yourself that is the most important work of this stage. The rediscovery of the woman underneath, who she is, what she loves, what she has not yet been or done or said or felt. She is worth finding. Every part of her. The grief and the anger and the unlived dreams